All right, guys, so in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create a glass material, a simple glass material. You're going to be using this 99% of the time in your architectural visualizations and elsewhere. Obviously, if you're creating some personal projects, you can go crazy with glass materials, etc., etc. But keep that in mind that glass materials usually take a longer time to render, so to say. If you have a very complex objects with a lot of depths, the objects are overlapping each other, etc., etc., glass materials are, one of the slowest materials to render, right? So first things first, tone mapping, ACS output off. I have a little bit of bloom and glare, as you can see here. These are the settings, 23.2. The next thing, I don't have fast preview denoiser during render, so I just want to see the real thing for now. And my sphere is very simple. I have some spheres inside. By the way, the normals are flipped. All of those mini spheres inside of this geometry piece are flipped. The normals are flipped. So let's just for them to work. So basically, I'm just gonna show you what I mean. So these normals are positive, as you can see, and if I'm gonna select that, as you can see, it's positive inside, it's negative outside, right? So it's just gonna work, right? So first things first, let's create a simple glass material, and literally this is how long it would take you to create a glass material. So Corona Legacy material, you can put this to 1, put this to 1, put this to 1. That's it. So reflection 1, refraction 1, that is your base glass material that you're going to be using this all the time on your glass windows, on your glassware, on the tables, dining tables, etc. This is your main bread and butter for the glass material. Like, this is your base, right? So I'm just going to apply this onto my model and just going to press interactive rendering. And as you can see now, I can see the bubbles inside as well. I thought that's going to be a nice detail for you guys to show. Obviously, this is going to be, longer to render because the rays has to go in, reflect, refract, refract. It's just a lot of calculations going on right now. But in a way, it does look nice. Now, very quick, if you're going to try to recreate something similar, if I'm going to, for example, select the whole object and deselect these guys and invert, what's gonna happen is flip. I'm not gonna see any of those spheres anymore, right? And this is how it works, because it's just gonna reflect what is inside of the sphere, right? Because it doesn't really have any thickness. Those spheres doesn't really have any thickness, and this is how the code is calculating the reflection and the refraction. So just keep that in mind if you're adding some bubbles into some kind of a solid object or etc. Just invert them, right? So and you're gonna start seeing them. It's a very simple trick, but some people do not know this, so just keep that in mind. All right, but that's not really important. We're just gonna cover the glass materials for now. So this is going to be your glass material. It's in a very simple material, works all the time. Now, very, very important setting. So if you go to Corona settings and in V-Ray, max ray depth, the global setting, I'm talking about the global setting, not the local setting on each and every material, but I'm talking about the global setting. By default, it's set to 5, right? So if I'm going to push this to 5, look what's going to happen. Actually, I'm just going to push this to the extremes, right? So keep in mind how many surfaces the rays, the reflection rays, the refractions rays have to come in, right? From the camera, right? So it has to, push through this piece, push through that piece, through that piece, through that piece, and then through the side wall there, right? And then the bounces has to go back again to my camera, right? So there's so many bounces going on, right? So I'm just gonna push to 1, and as you can see, it's very fast to render. I'm not really getting any refractions, any reflections. Well, I'm getting one reflection, right, which is my HDRI reflecting, right? But when I start to increase this, you can see that I'm getting a little bit more reflections now, right? I'm not getting refractions, right? Still not. When I'm gonna push this to 3, I'm getting 1 refraction ray, right? So I can see it through, but nothing is bouncing from it. So it's a topic for another tutorial. It's gonna be, you know, a longer one, but I just don't want to make it too boring, right? So just keep that in mind. For example, in V-Ray, 5 is the default one, right? For the global one. In V-Ray, you can control, you know, max def rays in inside of the material. You cannot really control that here. Corona has it global, which is kind of a very easy thing to control, right? So for example, let's just see. So by default, Corona has 25, right? So it's gonna cover most of the glass materials, thicknesses, you know, how many refraction bounces are you gonna have, reflections as well. It's just gonna cover everything. But let's just try to experiment a little bit with this first material, right? And this object in particular. So for example, 5, right? Bam, there we go. Let's just increase this to 10, right? So now I'm seeing my sphere that, you know, it kind of starts to work better, right? And now I'm looking at this black, it's, you know, it's lacking a little bit of refraction there. So let's just increase this to 15. We can see that this become lighter, right? So it's a lot better. So let's just increase this to 20. And you can see that we are not really getting any difference now, right? So 25 and 15. So I'm just gonna drop this to 15 now. Some parts became a little bit darker, but just it's very hard to notice, right? So what I would suggest when you're rendering your scene, and let's just say you have a lot of glassware in your scene, just test it out, right? Even 10 might work in your scene, right? And you will save some rendering time. Just keep in mind, if you're going to be dropping this number, the rendering times are just gonna, you know, decrease basically. As you can see, the noise is cleaning so fast right now, right? But when I put this to 25, which is the default value for Corona max def rays, you can see that, you know, the noise is cleaning so slow, right? But I have to say it looks, you know, the glass material works, you know, amazing. So, you know, let's just say for this tutorial, let's just leave this to 25 as a default. But, you know, for this approach, I would even use 15. It's going to be faster to render and I'm going to get, you know, kind of the same result, right? So just keep this number in mind, right? Like, for example, if you're shooting a product shot and you have only one object in the scene, you know, you can, yes, you can spend 25. That's perfectly fine. You know, you can spend even less if you want to. But you know, if you have a massive interior scene with a lot of glassware around, etc., you know, just play around with these, because sometimes you don't really, you know, will not need that. So for example, I'm just going to show you a very quick example. So let's just show you, sorry. I'm just going to hide my sphere and I'm going to, you know, put a glass piece there. So there you go. That's the glass piece. So let's just say this is a window, right? And I'm going to apply this material here. And as you can see, it works perfectly fine. I don't have any issues with it, right? Let's just put this to 5. Let's see if we're going to have any issues looking through the glass piece, right? Now, we don't really have any issues looking through the glass piece. It's just, you know, the cornering is getting darker now. So it's lacking those bounces, right? We're lacking bounces. So let's just increase this to 10. And this is perfectly fine. 10 is perfectly fine for one glass piece, right? So just keep that in mind. You know, I'm just trying to show you an example how to, you know, work with glass. So for example, you know, I put now 2 glass pieces, which are literally one behind the other. So let's just put this to 1. Whoops, sorry. I've just pressed interactive rendering. So I'm just gonna press, sorry, the production rendering. I'm just gonna press interactive rendering and put this to 1. Put this to 2, and as you can see, it's getting better and better. And 5, you know, even 5 is working perfectly fine. Like for example, if you're chucking this this glass piece into your window, or 2 of them, well, I wouldn't recommend putting 2 of them. Please don't try to replicate, you know, real life glass window packets. So don't try to do that. But I'm just trying to make a point here, right? So, you know, the higher max def ratio you're gonna go, you know, the better, the brighter reflections and refractions are gonna get. All right. So I hope this makes sense. So how to play around with max def. So as you can see, 15 is just perfect. It's almost perfect, right? You don't really need to go 25. You're not gonna see any difference. Now, I'm just gonna leave this 25 for this tutorial. My advice would be always, when you're rendering interior scenes with glass pieces into your in your interior, always select your glass piece. I'm just gonna delete the second one. Sorry, I'm just gonna delete. Doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna delete that one. You right click object properties, cast shadows, receive shadows off. Always try to keep this off, because keep in mind the glass piece will cast a little bit of shadows. So what I mean by that is it's gonna add up to calculations. All right, some areas where, you know, like furniture or whatever that are close to the glass, to the window or whatever, they're gonna become a little bit darker in a way. So basically what I'm trying to say, the glass piece as a geometry, even if it's refractive, it's gonna cast a little bit of the shadow, right? Even if it's at fullest refraction value, right? So always my advice would be, even in V-Ray, right click, cast and receive shadows off all the time, unless you're recreating some kind of a creative shot that you kind of will need that shadow, or for whatever reason, doesn't really matter, right? So always that thing off, right? So let's go back to, you know, creating materials. So for example, imagine this is a, you know, a window glass, and the second material that you're going to be, you know, creating like maybe 70-60% of the time is going to be called frosted glass or opaque glass, so to say. So basically a glass that is sanded or whatever, or you can even have a film on it, and it's basically, you're not going to see through it, right? You're going to see something through it, like silhouettes, if something is going to be very close to your you know, glass piece. But let me just show you an example. So something like that, right? So that's a completely transparent or refractive, so to say, glass piece, and that is opaque or frosted. So how do you create that? Well, it's very easy. You just copy this guy and you go to refraction, glossiness, and just put this to, for example, 0.6, and I will apply to my glass piece. And as you can see, everything that is close to the object, you're gonna start seeing some silhouettes there. But the more further, you know, the object gets from the glass, like for example, let me create a very simple example. Let me just put this on a layer, teapot, right? So we can see the teapot now. I'm gonna move it behind the glass. As you can see, we can see that there as well. And we're starting to lose, right? So as you know, the moment that it goes further away, we are starting to lose the teapot, right? So just keep that in mind. And by the way, you know, you can use the numbers from 5 to, you know, 7, something like that. So 5 and 7, perfectly fine. Usually I use 6.5 or 7. I'm using this on V-Ray as well. It's the same value. You don't really need to do anything else. You know, the color black, not completely black, you know, you can put 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, oh, sorry, not that, but, you know, just keep a little bit of room, right, for the contrast bits, right? So it doesn't really matter. So put the reflection to 1, refraction to 1, and for the frosted material, put this to 0.7 for the glossiness, and you get your most usable 2 materials, as you can see there, right? So I'm just gonna stop it for now. So I'm gonna delete this guy, and I'm gonna delete the teapot, and I'm gonna, sorry, I'm not gonna delete, my mistake. I'm not gonna delete the glass piece. I'm just gonna delete the teapot, and I'm gonna show my sphere again. All right, so we learned how to create a simple glass material, which is very fast to create. And then we created a frosted glass from this base glass material, right? So these 2 materials you're going to be using, you know, more or less all the time. So I'm gonna render this locally, interactively, and let's just say I'm gonna apply this material in here, and as you can see, you know, it's gonna take a while to render as well. As you can see, it's keeping it noisy for, you know, for a long time. But as you can see, you know, the bubbles are working fine here in this geometry, and, you know, everything is working perfectly fine. So this is your frosted glass. Now let's create some colored glass. Now I'm just gonna show you a very simple way. So let's just, you know, shift and click on our base. So I'm gonna create this here. And what we're gonna be doing is, so the simplest way how to create a colored glass piece is basically going to the refraction. You're not controlling the diffuse. The diffuse always stays black or blackish, right? Don't put 0. My minimum recommendation would be 1, 2, 3, something like that, right? So you're gonna go to refraction and you're gonna start changing the colors, right? So something like that. Now I wouldn't go, you know, with glass pieces, you can't go as red as you want. That's perfectly fine. This is a completely different thing. Like for example, when you're applying the diffuse color completely red, I would suggest using ray switcher just to, you know, remove that global illumination bleeding, right? But for the glass pieces, it's perfectly fine. You know, if for whatever reason you're rendering caustics in your interiors, which I wouldn't recommend, at least for some shots, yeah, like isolated shots, that's perfectly fine. But you know, this is what you're roughly getting here. And it's a very, very simple approach. By the way, this material, sorry, this color is not going to be dependent on, so to say, depth, right? So whenever you're changing the color here, so yellow, I don't know, green, you know, you're going to get that colored glass piece, right? So if you're, you know, removing a little bit of that saturation, and as you can see, it works very, very nicely. It really depends, you know, what result do you want to get. So this is the easiest and simplest way of how to create a glass material. Now look what's gonna happen, sorry, a colored glass material. Now look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna start playing around with the diffuse color. So basically what's happening is that you're kind of removing the contrast, right? So let's just put this to 1. And as you can see, your blackest areas are becoming more contrasty, more dark, right? So this is what I'm trying to say. Never, you know, try to put 0, because some areas you might get completely black, right? So if we check this area there, you know, as you can see, the green color on this RGB is 0. So you're kind of killing the information. So you can always increase the contrast later on in Photoshop with adjustment layers. That's perfectly fine. But just try to, you know, keep this, you know, give your blacks and highlights space, so to say. Same thing goes with the color intensities, right? Don't go too bright. Go a little bit maybe darker, and you know, desaturate a little bit, because you can always retrieve that information as long as you have the correct color in the first place. So if I'm gonna go and increase, you know, my diffuse a little bit brighter, as you can see, I'm losing the contrast in the darker areas. So just keep that in mind, right? So if you want to reduce the contrast in the black areas, just increase this number by a little bit. If I'm gonna go completely, you know, bright, it will give you, as you can see, I'm not really a fan of this result. This is a completely wrong result. It looks horrible. This is just horrible, etc., right? So just, you know, keep that in mind. If you want to increase it a little bit, you know, go ahead with this, with these kind of values, right? So very simple. So black 1, glossiness is 1, because this is a solid glass piece, right? IOR for the glass now. Now, if you're changing IOR for the reflection, change this one as well, okay? So they should be always the same, right? So let's just say we're changing the IOR, so for 0.6 and 0.6, and that would be my recommendation for the glass, 0.55 or 0.6, something like that, just a generic glass piece, right? So my recommendation would be, let's just say you want to create a more crystal material, right? So the IOR reflection fall off is a lot bigger, so to say, right? So you don't really need to stand in parallel to see the reflections or the refractions, so to say. It's a long topic, by the way. I'm trying to keep this short as possible. But if you're creating a crystal material or something like that, you know, I would go to 4 or 4 in here, right? So it's going to be very shiny, very, you know, it's going to be very shiny, so to say. The refractions and the reflections are going to be very shiny, but just keep that in mind to test it out. Even sometimes, as you can see, even the preview is showing you, right? So for example, the IOR, the parallel, is working fine now. So on the side here you can see that, you know, it's getting more parallel. So if I'm going to put this to 4, it's getting less parallel, right? So I can literally stand in front of it and I will see all the reflections from all around, right? So my recommendation, if you're creating a crystal glass or whatever, right, it has to be more refractive and reflective, so to say. You know, increase these two numbers in kind of the same way, right? In the same values. Don't try to keep this. You can, I'm not saying you can't, but you can. For example, I want less reflection, right? For whatever reason, I want less reflection, but more, you know, refraction, so to say. So, but keep in mind, you know, everything has to have a taste and boundaries. If you're going too crazy, the materials are going to start looking unrealistic, right? So you have to really, you know, check. My best recommendation would be, if you have a reference image online or something, you have a glass piece or something like that, you know, take a look at it and see, you know, how roughly it reacts to the light, to the reflections, etc. And just, you know, try to experiment with it a little bit, right? So it would look similarish. So, but for this tutorial, we're just creating a simple glass piece. So let's just keep it at 1.6, okay? All right, so let's just change the color to, I don't know, let's just change the color back to white, right? So let's just say, I don't know, completely white, right? You can do 255 perfectly fine. If you're gonna go on the refraction darker, by the way, okay, let me just do this. I'm just gonna copy this material and we're gonna create a darker material. So tinted glass, for example, right? Tinted in black. So let's just remove this guy, right? So in the beginning, it was, you know, perfectly refractive, so to say. There we go. And if you want it to be a bit more tinted, what you're doing is you're not removing reflection or the color, you're just playing with the refraction, right? So just removing this guy, right? You can go darker until it's gonna get, you know, very tinted black glass, so to say, right? Or you can control this number. It's completely the same thing. It's just keep in mind this box here it can take a texture in, right? So this box here, it doesn't take a texture in, right? So you're just literally increasing a color range from black to white. So this is going to be a black, completely black color. This is going to be 255 white color, right? Same is here. So if I put this to 1, I don't have a texture here. I'm going to put this to 0. It's going to be completely the same. 255 is going to be completely the same. But the thing is, this box has a texture slot. So I can plug a texture map, whatever I want to plug there, right? And it will work. So if you want to make it tinted glass, very simple, just make the refraction a little bit darker and you're going to get your glass piece darker. Now, a little bit more complicated glass, right? So depth. So what is depth? So the thicker or the deeper the glass piece is, the more darker the refraction is gonna get. So literally your refraction rays are gonna start dying, right, after a certain distance, right? So it's like, let's just take, for example, a seawater, right? So when you're standing, for example, on a shore, right, and the water is, let's just say, I don't know, 20 centimeters deep, right? You literally can see everything through the water, what is on the sand below, right? You know, swimming fishes, stones, whatever, right? This doesn't really matter. But the deeper you go, you're starting to lose that refraction, right? What's going on, you know, below the water. So this is what I'm gonna try to show you guys now. So let's just keep this to refraction, for example, white. So let's just keep this to completely white. And I'm gonna apply this. So This approach works very well with, you know, objects like these, for example, which has thickness, it has, you know, glass behind the glass or whatever. You know, it can even work on bottles, wine bottles, etc., etc. So it really depends, you know, when you want to use it, right? So what you're doing is you're going here, and then you're going to volumetric and SSS. So this is, you know, you can create translucent materials here as well, but I'm not going to be talking about translucent materials now. So keep volumetric scattering, right? And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be, so 0 is not going to do anything, right? So it's literally not saying, yeah, so as you can see, even the tip is saying distance 0 is a special value that will disable the effect completely. Yeah, so it's not gonna work. So let's just say I'm gonna put this to 5, and as you can see, it's getting very dark, right? It's getting very dark because the distance is so small. It's only 5 centimeters, right? And by the way, the setting here, the units are literally working according to your scene unit system, right? So for example, as you can see, my ball is around 1 meters in width, height, and length, right? So that is the scale, right, of the ball. So 5 centimeters is not that much, right, for this size of the geometry. So let's just say I'm gonna put 10, and as you can see, I'm getting brighter and brighter. I'm going with my refraction rays deeper and deeper and deeper, right? That was an easy one. Yeah. So so I'm just gonna put 20, 50, and as you can see, we're getting deeper and deeper, right? So 100, right? So that is 1 meter. Literally, now I should get almost exactly the same result as previously with 0. So let's just try it out. So 0, well, 0 gives me a little bit brighter, but let's just say I'm gonna put 200. You know, and as you can see, it's very similar to 0, right? So it's almost like it's going completely through it, right? The rays are going completely through it, so to say, the depth, right? So, and you can get very cool effects with this. Like, for example, I'm gonna put 50 or maybe 20. Okay, I'm gonna go with 20, and we can control this color and make, you know, our glass piece in very, you know, interesting color, so to say. So let's just say I'm gonna put a little bit more to, yeah, so something like a restored glass piece, right? So the beauty about this depth one is just it gives it more, so to say, realism, right? So keep in mind, I'm just gonna duplicate these materials, and I'm gonna call this depth. So I'm using depth, right? And here I'm gonna be using only refraction color, refraction. Right? I think I typed it right. So look, I'm just gonna go here, inside here, I'm gonna put 0. So this is not gonna work at all, right? So here is my ball with the depth, and here is my sphere, sorry, with this one. And I'm just gonna, what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna take this color, copy, right click, copy, and I'm gonna paste into the refraction, right? Refraction, paste. And take a look, what is the difference here, right? This is a very unified color look, right? So the color is kind of everywhere is unified, right? I'm not really getting some, you know, darker green somewhere. Obviously this is a black contrast playing from the diffuse, but look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna push this color with the depth onto my object. See the difference, right? Like, for example, you know, if you look, I'm just gonna stop for now. If you look at the depth of this piece right here, so look at my camera rays, right? The camera is standing there, and my rays are going through here. So all of this thing there, this area here of this ball, I'm getting more and more and more deeper, right? So to say, and thus this area here is getting darker and darker, right? So look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna, you know, even decrease this number here. So let's just say 10. So I'm getting even more nicer effect there, right? So obviously you can play around, you can, you know, even implement some refraction colors, and you can get very interesting results. Now I'm not gonna sit here for 4 hours. I already did that on V-Ray materials. And yeah, some people, I don't know who was watching 4 hours of that video or 3 hours, I cannot remember, but you can experiment in very nice ways with these materials, right? So for example, you know, if I'm on a green, let's just say, you know, yellow should work very well. Like, you know, I'm getting this kind of a yellowy refraction, but in a way, in very deep surfaces, I'm getting this greenish color, right? And you know, you can work in a lot of different ways here, as you can see. So now I can just put a little bit, so to say, or a lot. You know, don't go too extreme. Don't put these kind of a values, right? Because your highlights are gonna just get crazy. But just, you know, go along these kind of lines, and you can make it darker a little bit. So I'm just gonna press cancel, but you can play. Okay, you can play with absorption color, with the distance, right? Don't touch that. We're gonna speak about that later on. There's so many things to cover still. So you can play with absorption color, you can for the depth ones, and you can play with the distance, right? So let's just say increase the distance a little bit. And you can play with the refraction color as well. Don't play with the reflection color. If you're gonna change the reflection color, you know, it's gonna start reflecting that color, so to say. If you need a you know, a certain, like for example, see this reflection here, you know, it should be white, because in general, you know, I have a completely white reflective plane there, and it's just the reflections, and overall everything looks better. But usually you use the reflection color for the for the metal materials, and I did show that, you guys. So yeah, so keep the reflection always white, unless for some reason you need to change it. And by the way, this looks completely horrible, okay, and not realistic at all. So yeah, so I think that's pretty much almost it for you know, glass materials. There should be very simple to control, very simple to work with, and very fast to create. Now, in regards of the map, last thing I'm going to be showing you guys is, so for example, I'm going to create this material, and I'm not going to be using the depth, right? So I'm going to completely disable it, right? Just, I know this disabled, but I'm just going to keep this to white as well. And I'm just going to, you know, just for an easier approach. So, and I'm just going to make this color as white, right? I'm going to make this color as white, and I'm going to increase this to 255. So it's pure refraction, right? There we go. So this is my object. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create a map, right? So I was talking about maps. So let's just create some crazy weird map. So let's just say we're going to create a gradient ramp, right? We're going to create this, and we're going to put this to, let's just say, very, you know, rough number, so to say. We're going to create this color maybe to blue, and maybe this color a little bit more to the greenish side, right? So something like that. And we're going to create this to, I don't know, yellow, right? Completely yellow color. These are very extreme, obviously, ways how you can create it. Now, how you can test this? My suggestion would be create a gradient map or something, right? Or even the gradient ramp. And let's put this to black, and let's put another point there, double click, and let's put this to white, right? So we have a very rough separation, right? And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be applying this map into the diffuse for now. It doesn't really matter, so to say. So I'm just going to press stop and check my, you know, mapping, because this object was unwrapped, as you can see. Let me just put standard materials, enable transparency off, and as you can see, this is not the way that I want to go with, right? So what I'm going to do, so because this object is already unwrapped, right? What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be applying a second channel. So I'm just going to leave what I have already, but for this map, I'm going to use a channel 2. And as you can see, it went, you know, crazy, bonkers. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to applying a UV map, and I'm going to put here 2, right? So I want to use 2, right? And as you can see, I'm having this sort of like separation here right now, right? So I'm gonna maybe put this to, sorry, so click that, right click, 90%, perfect. And I'm just gonna do it like this, right? I'm gonna do it like this, and as you can see, this is, I'm just gonna extend this a little bit more, right? So something like that. So I can see that my map is working from down to up, or from up to down, really doesn't matter. And what I'm gonna do next is I'm just gonna press my camera, isolate off. I'm gonna press my object, and look what's gonna happen now. If I'm gonna plug this color into the refraction map, right? So by the way, this is the orientation as we're working, and this is the orientation here. So all the colors here are gonna go from down to up, or from top to down, right? It doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna put this into refraction map. As you can see, I can chuck this in here, bam, there we go. And I'm very sorry, I forgot to change this to 2. So I did change this to 2, but I forgot to change this, right? So this has to be on channel 2 because we already mapped it at 2 here, right? So as you can see now, it's working perfectly fine. So my mistake was, yeah, that I forgot to change that. So there we go. As you can see, our model now working perfectly fine. Green on the bottom, and everything is, you know, translucing perfectly fine here. Yeah, and I think that is yeah, very important, because sometimes when you have a lot of maps and you're applying different UV maps, just, you know, try not to forget, if you're changing a map channel here, you know, and you have a map a UV modifier on top, just try to match them. If you want that this is gonna act on your ball, on your object, whatever, try to, you know, put the same ID map channel, you know, on your modifier, so it would work, right? Because I completely forgot. So yeah, I think we pretty much covered a lot of things on these simple glass materials. These are, by the way, these are very, very simple glass materials. You can create very, you know, unique looking glass materials, so to say, but I'm gonna keep that for a more complex tutorial, so to say, and I think it's gonna be longer as well. So yeah, guys, thank you very much. Let me know what you think. Was it too hard, or, you know, it was perfectly fine? Let me know if you want any further tutorials on any topic in the future, and I will, you know, think about it, what I can do about it, and yeah, we can go from there, guys. So please don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you very much for watching.